Hey everybody, I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Well, today we have a special edition of the show where we recapture the finest moments and commentary, bringing you the best of One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. All right, so let's begin. Joining us now in the studio is Ambassador Ido Aharoni, who served as Israel's Consul General in New York from 2010 until just last year. Now, today, the former ambassador serves as Global Distinguished Professor at New York University's School of International Relations and a member of the International Advisory Board of APCO Worldwide, which is a top 10 communications company based in Washington. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's begin with the biggest, perhaps the biggest news of the year, we could say. U.S. President Donald Trump's bombshell recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and his announcement to move the American embassy accordingly. Protests are continuing throughout the Muslim world in response to this, and the U.S. used its veto power for the first time in 6 years to strike down a UN Security Council resolution that would reverse Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This comes together with several resolutions at the General Assembly this week, including one that has affirmed the Palestinian right to self-determination. Now, my question for both of you is, what is the significance of all of this United Nations activity?
Well, the United Nations is becoming less and less relevant in the world, and I think that's good news. The organization is bureaucratic, is inefficient, is ineffective. If I pose our viewers a very simple question, who's better positioned to tackle a big issue like world hunger, the UN or Amazon? I guarantee that 99% of our viewers would say immediately Amazon, and that's a sad statement about the state of the United Nations. The big news to me is not necessarily the announcement that President Trump made regarding Jerusalem, which we should all welcome with open arms, but rather the fact that he stated that the key to understanding the imminent instability in the Middle East is not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And in many ways, he is the first to actually say, in the last 50 years, the first president to actually say, my friends, we have bigger fish to fry. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is an important conflict to resolve, but let us not forget for a second, it has never been about Israel. The bigger issue is the rift between Sunnis and Shiites. The much bigger issue is the lack of accountability, which is chronic in Arab societies. Just yesterday, I read in the New York Times a ridiculous report from a refugee camp in Lebanon, where the refugees were furious because of the president's announcements claiming that Jerusalem is theirs. And this was never on the table. You know, the question is not whether, the Jews are going to be allowed to live in West Jerusalem or East Jerusalem. The question is, what are we going to do with the city of Jerusalem ourselves?
Well, first of all, I want to commend Ido for the great work he did in New York. I saw it firsthand.
Thank you.
Israel has had many, many great consul generals in New York. It's a very, very important job. And Ido was just a phenomenal representative of the nation state of the Jewish people. Everywhere I turned, from Shul and Park East to celebrations to anti-BDS demonstrations, there was Ido representing Israel in the most positive way. He also made Israel a non-controversial issue among many in New York. And I think he deserves enormous commendation for the work he's done. And I wish him well in continuing to support Israel and support peace and support the kinds of approach that he has had over the years. Having said that, I have a minor disagreement with him. I agree that Israel is not at the center of the conflicts in the Middle East, but I think the Israeli-Palestine conflict has a significant role to play. I think Israel could increase its great diplomatic efforts that it's now making with the Gulf states in Africa, in South America, India, China, were it to be able to achieve a peace with security with the Palestinians. So I would want to bring the Palestinian issue back, perhaps not to the center, but to play an important role in the future of Israel. Having said that, let me get to Jerusalem. You talked about the veto that the United States used recently. If the United States had used that veto back in December of 2016, we wouldn't have had this problem at all. The full and complete and total blame for everything that's going on now, all the protests about Jerusalem, lies at the foot of one man, and that is Barack Obama, who out of spite and out of pique and out of personal anger put his personal interests over those of the United States, over those of Israel, over those of world peace, over those of our allies, by allowing a UN resolution to go forward in December of 2016 while he was a lame duck, which changed the status quo. It was he who changed the status quo, because that resolution basically declared that the Western Wall, the Hebrew University and Hadassah Hospital access roads, and the Jewish quarter were all illegally occupied territory. It was an absurd conclusion. Occupied from whom? This territory was never supposed to be part of Jordan or a Palestinian state. It may have been supposed to be part of some international corridor that included Bethlehem as well, but that had been long abrogated by reality on the ground. And when President Obama allowed that veto not to be made and allowed the resolution to go through, that's when I certainly changed my mind. I said it's about time for a president to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to do what every president in modern times have done, that is promised to move the embassy to Jerusalem. So I think this was a reaction to the UN resolution. The blame is on the UN resolution, and the blame for the UN resolution is squarely at the feet of the president who I voted for twice, namely Barack Obama, who at the end of his presidency disgraced himself, shamed America, and did something just awful, which hurt the prospects for peace more than almost anything done during his administration.
A recent event that has sparked heated controversy was a video of Palestinian teenager Ahid Tamimi and another Palestinian teenager accosting and even hitting IDF soldiers. Now, the soldiers kept their cool and they didn't arrest the girls on the spot, but now Israeli police have arrested both of the teenagers following the incident. Ambassador, what is your take on how this looks for Israel internationally, especially given what is going on?
You know, things like that will happen and will continue to happen constantly because of the proliferation of smartphones and cameras, and so things like that will happen. I think that in this case, the soldiers handled it the right way. This is not always the case, as we've seen in other cases. The situation where you have military presence among civilians is not going to produce nice images. This has to be our working assumption. And Israel is not perfect. We try to improve, but we're not perfect. And I suggest that people will not judge Israel by incidents that don't go well, by our imperfections, but rather by the way we try to fix them. And in the case of the IDF, I think that the IDF is doing its utmost to investigate, and if they need to punish cases that soldiers did not behave accordingly. But I think in this case, you see two mature soldiers that knew how to handle the situation. It's not an easy situation. I've been as a soldier in the West Bank. It's not an easy situation.
But it shows a broader picture. Israel is the only country in the world where episodes like this become international incidents. In every other country, and every country has problems with how police deal with protesters, how the army deals with protesters, but only in Israel does an incident like this, which is a 1 on a scale of 10, maybe a -3 on a scale of 10, becomes an international incident covered around the world. The question is not how a soldier behaves. These are 18, 19-year-old kids from incredibly diverse backgrounds, educationally, culturally, economically. It's how the government responds, how the IDF responds, how the police respond. And no country in the world responds in a more positive way to any kind of incident of violence than Israel does. Compare Israel to some of the American cities where you've had African-American young men killed by white, often policemen, and how often the cities don't respond properly, how often juries acquit in what look like cold-blooded murder cases. As Ido said, Israel isn't perfect, but I have to tell you, as somebody who cares deeply about police misconduct, I've focused a lot of my life on that. I don't think there's any country in the world that responds more positively and more constructively with these inevitable incidents than Israel, and especially a country that is under so much pressure and so much visibility. You mentioned iPhones, and of course that's true, but most iPhones don't end up on national and international television the way every incident in Israel does. So I want to commend Israel for the way, A, it deals with the problems, B, how it tries to get better, and C, how it resists pressure from some on the extreme right to pardon and excuse acts of violence which shouldn't be pardoned and excused.
In case you didn't know, most Israeli soldiers celebrate being discharged from the military with a big post-army trip around the world. Now get this, 410,000 Israelis between the ages of 20 to 24 go abroad each year. If you think about it, that's a potential for creating a public relations army in of itself. And that's where our next guest comes into the picture. Reserve Captain Eyal Biram has helped found a unique program to harness that manpower, and he's here to tell us all about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Eyal.
Hello, hi.
So tell us a little bit about this program that you have just started.
Yeah, so actually I discharged from the military just a few months ago. And during my service, when I was an officer, me and two of my friends from a unit founded an initiative. The idea is real simple. There is a lot of 10,000 of IDF soldiers that finish in the army, and they have one big dream to travel the world, to meet people, but they are not prepared to speak about Israel. They are not prepared to know why it's so important and why it's the...
Well, they probably don't even know that that's something that they're going to have to deal with when they're abroad, right?
Yeah, they don't know what they are going to deal with, and they don't know what is the potential of meeting people from all over the world and giving them the, let's say, show them the nice and the beautiful faces of Israel around the world. So we set together 3 friends, and we understood that we are need to take responsibility for that situation because nobody had already taken it. And we published this, we founded and we started this program last year. We already had thousands of soldiers that already had in our program, and we are now escorting soldiers that are abroad. And
I understand that 7,000 soldiers have already been trained in this program's first year, and a whopping 5,000 more were trained just last month. So you guys are really moving ahead with this. You're collaborating with the IDF, right?
Yeah, we're working in collaboration, high collaboration with the Defense Ministry and the IDF, and each one of the Israeli soldiers today, before he finishes in the army, will join part of the Israeli workshop, Israelis workshops. And today, when we are meeting soldiers, we are talking with them firstly about the knowledge, because they don't know, they have a lack of knowledge, why it's so important to speak about Israel. And afterwards, they don't have any communication skills, how they can, let's say, how they can engage the situation, and they can show, they can tell the stories, they can show the experience about the personal stories and about the army experience and everything. And when you think about the numbers and the meetings, and we know today that each one of the soldiers are meeting 5 people when they are abroad, mostly 5 people that I will have, let's say, a long conversation and the opportunity to show them my personal story, the things I'm thinking about Israel, and it's really simple, and it's going very, very good, because all of the soldiers we already met want to take part in the program, and in the future, in the short future, we are planning to be part of one of the Israeli national program that each one of the Israeli would like to take part in.
So is the idea to just only train people who want that training, or to kind of implement it into the army and make it a required training? Yeah,
today is a mandatory workshop that each one of the soldiers have to take part of it, and this is just the first mission. The other mission is to escort the travelers when they are abroad, because they have a lot of questions, like we'll ask Professor Dershowitz, and they have a lot of questions, and they need our help And the message for the soldiers is really simple. It's not really important if you are believe in the right solution for Israel or the left side. We are all, everyone and all of the soldiers love Israel. It's important for, and the images of Israel is important. And because of that, they have to know how the small conversation can make the change for Israel image.
Professor,
but I would go much further than that. I think it's a terrific idea, Yael, and I want to help out in any way I can if I can help talk to some of these people. But I do think that you have to do more than just talk to 5 people. I think if you have thousands of Israeli soldiers, or as articulate as you are and experienced as you are, coming around the world, they should be speaking at high schools and colleges and universities and answering the lies of Break the Silence and other soldiers who come and just state one side and exaggerate that one side against Israel. Your folks are people who've been on the front lines, have experience, and you're young, and you would be very attractive to college audiences. So I think it's important that when Israelis travel the world, it's arranged for them in advance to speak to several hundred people on university campuses and describe the experience and talk about how you don't represent left or right, that you represent just generally support for Israel's right to thrive and Israel's right to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people, speaking up against the BDS movement and against other efforts to delegitimate and demonize Israel. So I think you can expand what's already a terrific program. Instead of every Israeli soldier meeting 5 people, why not have every Israeli soldier meet 500 people and speak in front of them and make the case, what I call the 80% case. Don't get into the issues that divide the Israelis. Get into the issues that unite the Israelis and make the common case for Israel at American universities and high schools as well. It's important to make the case in high school. And I think the folks would enjoy it very much, going from college to college and high school. It doesn't mean they should, deny them the opportunity to go out and have a good time and see parts of the world. But, to spend a day a week during their trip at a university, I think would be very, very productive, and it would help make their trip very fulfilling to them and have a big impact on the future of Israel.
One of the series stars is under intense scrutiny for sexual assault allegations. Kevin Spacey has been accused of making a sexual advance towards American actor Anthony Rapp when he was just 14 years old. And now a second man is alleging Spacey also sexually harassed him. Now, interestingly, these new allegations do not represent the first time that Kevin Spacey's name has come up in the public sphere for such behavior. Back in 2005, the show Family Guy even made a joke out of him by featuring the character Baby Stewie running naked through a shopping mall as he screamed, "Help, I've escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement." Now, I mention this only because if these allegations are in fact true, it seems that this could be yet another case of a so-called open secret in Hollywood that has long been swept under the rug. Now, what can we expect next? Is Hollywood itself about to fall?
No. First of all, we have to remember the presumption of innocence. We've basically eliminated that. Look, even in this case, the House of Cards has canceled shooting based on an allegation. And I think we need proof, and we need a high level of proof before we start going after people. In the Weinstein case, he's admitted certain of the allegations, but denied others of the allegations, particularly non-consensual sex. We have to presume everybody innocent, and we have to wait until the process unfolds. I just saw 3 Dartmouth professors were suspended based on an allegation. Look, if these allegations are true, they're very, very serious. And it applies not only to Hollywood, it applies to many political figures. There have been histories of political figures using sexual harassment. It applies in academia. We know that there are professors who have had relationships with students who they grade or recommend. All of this should stop, and I think the Weinstein disclosures are going to have a big impact on stopping that. But we can't sacrifice our presumption of innocence and our requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt before we go after people and destroy their careers.
So I'm assuming for now you're going to continue watching House of Cards?
Well, I love House of Cards, and I won't allow one person's alleged derelictions to deprive me of the pleasure I get from watching him describe other people's derelictions. The interesting thing, of course, is he plays somebody, a president who is bisexual and who has all kinds of issues and commits far, far worse crimes as president than he, the actor, has actually been accused of. So, we're seeing this is a transformative event in American history, and it ought to transform our attitudes toward harassment, but it should not transform our attitudes toward requiring proof and presuming people innocent until the proof is forthcoming.
We're going to end our program by throwing you a change-up. The World Series has come and gone, and both of our favorite teams, the Yankees and the Red Sox, didn't make it. Your childhood love, the Dodgers, did, however, but just like they did when you were growing up, they disappointed right at the end. There did happen to be a new wrinkle in this year's series. Before you say anything, and David Leishman from Kibbutz Gezer has something to ask you about it.
Sure.
Hi, Alan. My name is David Leishman. I'm originally from New York, but living on Kibbutz Gezer for over 40 years, the home of the first baseball field. Alan, you and I have probably been baseball fans all of our lives and always rooting and supporting the great Jewish baseball players like Hank Greenberg and Sandy Koufax, who are really among the best. My son, Alon Leishman, grew up playing baseball at Gezer, but since he's 10 years old, has been playing on Israel's national team and actually coached and played with the World Baseball Classic for Team Israel. Today he's with the Seattle Mariners. We just spent so many wonderful hours watching baseball and the World Series and seeing the incredibly wonderful talent and power of two great Jewish baseball players, Jock Peterson of the Dodgers and Alex Bregman of the Astros. My question to you is, are we seeing a new surge of Jewish baseball superstars?
What a great question. Of course, I'm sleeping longer these days because I'm not staying up every night watching World Series games. This was one of the great World Series in history, except for Game 7, which was a little boring. But some of the other games were among the most exciting I've ever seen. And I've been watching baseball since 1945. And of course, my favorite season ever was 1947, the year Jackie Robinson broke in. And I got our rabbi to make a bracha for him, pretending that he was a new person in town who got a new job. And of course, I grew up down the block from where Sandy Koufax's father, Irving, moved and opened up a law practice. And I knew Sandy growing up, and my wife brought him over to our home for I think it was my 50th birthday. And so it was great to see Sandy in the stands looking so wonderful at the age of, I think, 82 or something like that. Jews have become normalized in America. Bregman, for example, grew up in Albuquerque and went to the same shul in the same Hebrew school that our dear friends, the Ashes, who live in Placitas, New Mexico, their kids went to school. So, they've known this kid growing up. Friends of mine in Los Angeles have known him for a long time. He's an extraordinary player, an extraordinary third baseman, and an incredible hitter, and a very, very young man. So, yeah, I think we'll see normalization. I think we'll see Jews playing very, very well. Being Jewish and playing baseball is not remarkable. Being Jewish and playing basketball has become a bit remarkable, although Jews started the NBA, and the first teams in the NBA were dominantly Jewish. But today, baseball has become the sport that has more Jews proportionately than any other sport. So I think, yeah, we will see more Jews in baseball, and I hope we'll see them on winning teams.
That wraps up this edition of One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. If you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to ILTV.tv or our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week.